Hello, everybody. Welcome back to AP US History. So, today we're going to be taking a look at the presidency of James Monroe and the time period known as the Era of Good Feelings. And we'll be getting more into why that is called the Era of Good Feelings momentarily. So, to go ahead and get started, we need to talk about how Monroe even got to be president. So, he is overwhelmingly going to be elected in 1816, 1820. He's going to win, by some of the biggest winning margins in presidential elections history. All right. So the era of good feelings is that time period after the War of 1812. We've just beaten the British a second time. We're all feeling pretty good. So we're pretty much going with the party of Jefferson and Madison and all the Democratic Republicans, and that's what Monroe was. So, like, hey, under these presidents, yeah, we did pretty good. We got the Louisiana Territory. We beat the British again. We got some good stuff going for us. This party must be doing something right. So, they're going to give James Monroe an overwhelming shot. And, as you can tell by the comparison of the 1816 map to the 1820 map, everybody must have been liking what he was doing in office for him to get reelected by that big of a win. So electoral votes 232 to 3. Yeah, that's pretty big. All right, so just a little cartoon to pretty much put it into perspective. What do you think's going on there? Well, I'll tell you what's going on. It says it all right here. We Americans were proud of ourselves for standing up to the mighty British Empire a second time. We seem to have their respect and Europe's and our own for the first time. All sections of the U.S., North, South, and West began pulling together, cooperating to build our nation. So basically, things are running smooth. So that's the era of good feelings definition. Everything is running smoothly. Everyone's working together. There's not a whole lot of tensions that are like up front, at least. So yeah, things are going pretty smooth. And with all of this, we're going to get a rise in nationalism where we're prideful in being Americans. We got good things going for us. We're going to see a wave of patriotism affecting how we're naming places, such as the counties of the different states, like Georgia, for instance. We've got all of these names here, which are names of important people in our history or places in our history. So Jackson, yeah, that must be talking about Andrew Jackson, the hero of New Orleans. Lafayette, that would be referencing the Marquis de Lafayette, the Frenchman who was part of Washington's entourage and helped us win the American Revolution. Washington, of course. Jefferson, of course. Monticello, a famous home in Virginia, and a founding father lived there after all. A lot of important names are being spread throughout, just like there's always a Washington Street or a Jefferson Avenue or places like that for road names in different towns and cities. Right. Literature is going to start reflecting the nationalism. Noah Webster, Webster's dictionary is going to be following American language in North America. We're going to see the rewriting of how certain words are spelled, like jail. Yeah, I bet you never would have guessed the original spelling was Gaol, or theater, where you switch the E and the R at the end. Honor, color, valor, endeavor, they all originally had use at the end of those words. So yeah, we're starting to Americanize things. All right. We're going to see American literature starting to come to the forefront, like Washington Irving with The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, James Fenimore Cooper with his Leatherstocking Tales, which include The Last of the Mohicans, which is a great story. Then we have Nathaniel Hawthorne with The Scarlet Letter. These are all American classics by American authors, which, was not really a thing until the 1800s, early 1800s in this case. All right. Monroe's goals as president were to promote national unity and America's place in the world. All right, so as you can see here, we have the different parties and them being in charge. So first is the Federalists, Washington and the first Adams. Then we have the Democratic Republicans, which is Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, and then his successor, John Quincy Adams, the son of John Adams, the second president. And then after that's Andrew Jackson. All right, so by 1816, Federalists were very weak, so the Democratic Republicans could basically get away with whatever they wanted, and the people were supporting them, so there was really nothing anybody could do anyway. So, Monroe and the Republicans, meaning the Democratic Republicans, they're just going to be called Republicans for short now. Uh, so, Congress, they're going to use the time that they have in power. So, from 1801 to 1829 to promote American nationalism, these strong feelings, this era of good feelings for being an American, and it's going to help us expand and grow as a country and a people. So, we're going to have them try to do this in three ways. Through the government, we're going to see an increase in the national government's power over the states. So we're going to see a transition to what Jefferson originally wanted, which was stronger state powers, to having stronger national government powers. All right. And some of the ways that's going to happen is through the use of the Supreme Court under John Marshall, perhaps the single most influential Supreme Court Chief Justice ever in the Supreme Court's history. So he's going to use the judgeship that he has with a bunch of cases to set a lot of precedents that are going to solidify the hold that the national government has in policy and law. So some examples here. Fletcher versus Peck. The court's going to rule that a state law is unconstitutional for the first time ever. So it's like, no, you can't do that by law, of the Constitution. You cannot do this. So no, you're done. Cohens versus Virginia. The court is going to overturn a state court decision for the first time. It's like, okay, we outrank you. It says it in the Constitution, and we're going to do it now. And then Gibbons versus Ogden. This is one of the big ones. The court rules that the federal Congress, not the states, has the power under Constitution to regulate interstate commerce. One state does not have the authority over trade of another state. That's what that case is about. New York is trying to control the trade between New York and New Jersey. New York doesn't have jurisdiction over New Jersey, so that's why it falls under federal jurisdiction. All right, next way is through the economy. We're going to encourage industry and transportation to link the South, North, and the West. And by doing that, we're going to have one of the most influential congressmen of the early 1800s, Henry Clay, who's going to propose something called the American system that is going to try to unify the economics of the North, South, and West. All right. It's also going to help create a second bank of the United States to help keep the money strong in America so that we don't have like a financial collapse. Right? It's also going to create tariffs to encourage industry and limit like us buying goods from other countries, like from Great Britain. And also it's going to hopefully improve transportation with roads and canals so we have faster, easier shipping, which is going to also in turn cut down on cost of things so that we're going to want to buy American-made items more. All right, so for instance, we have a lot of canals up here in the north, and there's roads. We got some main roads going down. This one right here is essentially the precursor of 95, the major interstate highway. We also, of course, have the rivers like the Mississippi River and all the rivers that branch off of it, like the Ohio, the Cumberland, the Arkansas, the Missouri, all of those. All right. So we're going to have the southern cotton being used up north in our clothing factories. The northern factories, we're going to make goods that will be sold everywhere. And in the West, that is our food production. So they all have their purposes and they have to work together for everything to run smoothly. And that basically for the first part of the 1800s is a success. Now, foreign policy, the third thing that's going to try and have us unified. We're going to try to expand our borders and increase our role in world affairs. We want to try and get ourselves into like a world power status. All right, so after the War of 1812, we're going to start just pouring out west. And by 1840, so just under 30 years later, a third of our population is in these yellowed Western territories. That is a huge movement of people going in one direction, no matter what time period you're looking at. That is humongous amounts of people. All right? And because of this huge flow of population, Congress is going to put 5 new states into the country. We've got, Louisiana, then we have Indiana, Illinois, Alabama, Mississippi. They're all going to come in and they're going to just show that we are a growing country. We have a growing population. We are a power on the rise. All right? And economic and territorial growth is going to have us have a need for securing our borders and settling any border disputes that we have with other nations. So, like British Canada, for instance, up here, the British are all up here in Canada. The Spanish have all of this territory, so we want to solidify our borders there so we know whose land is whose. All right. Now, Monroe and at the time, Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, they're going to use a lot of foreign policy to promote all of these things from into happening. So 1818, we're going to have an agreement with the British to establish a Canadian border along the 49th degree. So basically, this line right here is going to divide our territory, British up here, America down here. And when we get the Oregon Territory, it's going to divide it in half between us, essentially. All right, 1819, we're going to get Spain to give us Florida in the Adams-Onis Treaty. All right, so that's how we get Florida. Now, in the early 1800s, Latin America is going to start breaking up, and in South America as well, and they're going to start having their own independence movements. And we are going to support this, of course, because, hey, we're a newly independent democratic nation who broke away from a foreign power, which was, empire. And we're, of course, going to be like, hey, you guys do what you got to do. So what we're going to want to do is we want to now keep the Europeans from trying to reconquer these newly freed countries because, we kind of want to have trade deals with them and make our own money and economic growth through them, as well as trying to help promote their freedoms and, democratization as well. So that is how we're going to get, in 1823, the Monroe Doctrine. This is basically a warning to Europe that we will protect the Western Hemisphere. We basically establish ourselves as the police of the West. And basically, if you come over here and try to retake your colonies or start up new ones, you're going to have to fight us for it. But if you already have a colony, you can keep that colony because you own it still. But no new colonies and no trying to take back one that kicked you out. That's a no-go. Right? So we are now the watchdogs of the West. All right, Arrow Good Feelings is also going to have its issues, which start to really come to the forefront in the later part of this time period, the late 1820s. And as you can tell from here, it's going to have a little something to do with slavery. All right, so you can see it is definitely spreading during this 30-year period from 1790 to 1820. Northerners and Southerners, they definitely are going to disagree over slavery and taxes and how they are all going to play a role with the government. And these disagreements are going to basically be all anybody has to talk about for about 40 years, from 1820 to 1860. And this is our buildup to the American Civil War, essentially. All right. So when Missouri is going to try to become a state, we're going to have what's called sectionalism emerging. And sectionalism is basically you have the North, the South, and the West. Those are our sections, and they each want something different. Now, Northerners, they did not want the Southern states to increase in their power in the national government, because then they're going to start having more laws that favor the agricultural slaveholding South and not the manufacturing North. All right? So we have to have try a balance between the two. Now, so if Missouri enters as a slave state, they're going to have 2 more senators than the North, as well as who knows how many representatives in the House of Representatives. So that is an imbalance of power that the North does not want. So in 1820, we're going to have Henry Clay. See, he comes up again. He's important. He's going to negotiate what is called the Missouri Compromise. And this is a really good settlement for this particular issue, at least early on. And what is going to happen is Missouri is going to become a slave state, and Maine is going to be broken away from Massachusetts because they used to be the same thing. Like Massachusetts used to own Maine. They're now going to become a free and independent state on their own with no slavery. So we're going to have a balance, a slave state and a free state, to keep the numbers even. All right. Now, another result of this is slavery is going to be outlawed in all Western territories north of the 3630 latitude line, which is this green line that you see here in the center of the map. Basically, anything besides Missouri north of this line, when it becomes a state, it's free. Anything below it that we would gain in the future, because we're going to get this in the future, would be slave states. So that is the first agreement that we have to try and maintain the peace and keep tensions low between our two opposing sides. All right, that is where we're going to leave off today. Be sure to check and make sure that you get all your work done. And all right, I will talk to you again next time.